Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Let me just get my slides up. Right. Okay. So yeah, I've given a couple of talks so far about some of the false gods that Israel worshipped in the Old Testament, and tonight I'm going to look at the very first one they turned to, and that was the golden calf. Now, after the Exodus out of Egypt, um, the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb to receive the word of the law from the Lord. It took them about 3 months to get there. They tracked over the desert and eventually got there, probably in this spot down here. There's some dispute about exactly where it is, but that's the traditional site, and I've got no reason to dispute that for now. But in any case, Exodus 19, verse 10 says, "The Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today, and let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of the people upon Mount Sinai." And in verse 19 it says, "And it came to pass in the third day in the morning there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled." It would have been a terrifying sight to see, just this sound of a trumpet coming out of nowhere. The thick cloud, this is probably something like what it looked like. This is actually a photo of lightning striking a volcano, but something to let your imagination hook onto at least. It probably looks something like this. So it says that Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mountain, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. It was a tremendous thing to see. Exodus chapter 20, verse 18, "All the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die." So obviously all the people were terrified of the presence of God coming down, and it was a striking thing to see. So Moses eventually goes up to the mountain to receive the law. And it goes on for about 4 chapters, but just to summarize the first bit of it, in Exodus chapter 20, God spake all these words, saying, "I am the Lord thy God, which has brought thee out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to serve them." The very first thing that God says to them when he speaks the law. And of course, it's the very, very first law that they break. So it goes on for another 4 chapters detailing some of the more specific laws and other things like that. But in Exodus chapter 24, Moses comes down from the mountain and it says, "Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgment. And all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which the Lord hath said we will do. And Moses wrote the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning, built an altar, and he makes sacrifice and things like that for the atonement of the people. And it's all going great. The people have been put in awe at the sight of the Lord and at his power. And it gets interesting in the next chapter. This is AI-generated garbage, but it might give you some idea about what it would have looked like. Exodus chapter 24, it says, "Then went up Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in his clearness. And upon the nobles of the children of Israel he laid not his hand. Also they saw God, and did eat and drink." Which, I mean, that must have been incredible. The elders of the people saw God face to face and stood in his presence, eating and drinking. So now, I'm sure with all this incredible spectacle and the honor of seeing the Lord face to face, I'm sure they're all fully convicted in their faith. and loyalty towards the Lord for the rest of their lives, and they'll never waver, except for like a couple of weeks later. So Exodus 24, it goes on, and the Lord invites Moses up into the mountain where he gives him the rest of the law. He goes on, and Moses is up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And the Lord gives him the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of the high priests and the garments and the rituals and the sacrifices, and explains all of this and how it's meant to work. And in the meantime, all the people are just sort of waiting at the foot of the mountain. So it's 40 days and 40 nights. And then we pick up in Exodus 32. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods which will go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in your ears of your wives and of your sons and of your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and Aaron received the gold of them and fashioned it with a graving tool after he had made a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. If you remember, just a couple of chapters earlier, the first four things that the Lord had said were, I am the Lord thy God which brought you out of Egypt. And here the people are saying, These be thy gods which brought thee out of Egypt. The Lord said, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Here they made themselves another god to go before them. He said, Thou shalt not make any graven image. They specifically make a graven image. He says, Thou shalt not bow down to any idols, and they bow down to idols. And it's only been 40 days since they saw the Lord descending on the mountain. And by all accounts, it seems like the Lord is still up there. It says somewhere else that the top of Mount Sinai was still burning with the presence of the Lord. It's like familiarity breeds contempt. There's that old saying. They were awed and amazed by the presence of the Lord, but then it's like a month later and he's still there, and they've kind of gotten used to it, to the point that they can completely break all the rules that he gave them straight away. But not only that, they've only been out of Egypt for 3 months at this point. And in the last 3 months, every single day, they had been provided with manna out of heaven on the ground. And still, while they were around Mount Sinai, they were being provided with manna from the Lord every day. Every single day, they had seen the Lord leading them with a pillar of fire and a pillar of smoke. They had seen the parting of the Red Sea and the destruction of Pharaoh's army. They had seen the bitter waters of Marah being made drinkable. They had seen Moses striking the rock in Rephidim and water coming out. They had seen the victory over the Amalekites when Moses held up his hand with the rod. And the elders of the people had seen God face to face. Now, one of the things that I've been trying to do with this series of talks is to understand the traps that people had fallen into about why they would go off and worship this God and that God. But honestly, in this case, I can't see why they've done this. They've just been seeing so many incredibly powerful miracles every single day for the last 3 months, and they still just turned right away from it. These people, these Israelites, they had a serious attitude. And it's amazing that the Lord didn't smite them and destroy them. It reminds me actually of in the New Testament when Jesus goes off to pray for 1 hour and comes back to find all of his disciples had fallen asleep. Exodus 32 verse 9, the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. History very nearly went a different way that day, but fortunately for the Israelites, Moses managed to talk God out of it, out of destroying them all, and instead he went and dealt with them. So Genesis 32, in verse 19, says, "It came to pass, as soon as Moses came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables or tablets out of his hand and brake them beneath the mount." And maybe that's, we call an image made out of shattered ceramic a mosaic. Maybe it's because of this. Probably not, though. So it says, "He took the calf which they had made and burnt it in the fire and ground it to powder and strawed it upon the water and made the children of Israel drink of it." In Deuteronomy 9:21, it says that there was a brook that ran out of the mountain and through the camp. But when you take ashes from a fire like that and mix it with water, it actually makes a type of crude soap called lye. So Moses was basically making all the people wash their mouth out with soap. So it goes on to say in Exodus 32, Moses confronts Aaron and he says, "What did this people do unto thee that thou hast brought so great a sin unto them?" And Aaron said, "Let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people, that they are set on mischief. For they said unto me, Make us gods which may go before us." And later on, it goes on. So they gave me the gold, and I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. As my music teacher would have said, that's a little boy's excuse, and you're a big boy now. So this seems to be a terrible failing on Aaron's part, building a golden calf and making all of Israel to sin. But there seems to be perhaps more to it than that. Reading ahead over the next few chapters, Aaron doesn't get punished for his actions here. In fact, in Genesis 32:35, it says, "The Lord plagued the people because they made the calf which Aaron made." So it's a bit ambiguous about whether Aaron made the calf or whether the people made the calf. But you go in the next couple of chapters, and Aaron is anointed as the high priest and serves in the tabernacle of the Lord. And in verse 25 to 29 of the same chapter, Aaron and the other sons of Levi separate themselves from the congregation and slaughter 3,000 of the Israelites who had sinned with the calf. So I think it's really saying that Aaron himself hadn't led the people astray. The people had rebelled, as we'd seen from their character for the past 3 months. They'd rebelled and they'd dragged Aaron along with them. And he was very much a victim of circumstances. It's hard to resist the will of a million determined and rebellious people. These were the same people who, in spite of all those miracles, had been complaining against Moses nonstop. So Moses and Aaron were there to lead the people and to instruct them in the ways of the law. But it's like the saying says, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can't force these people to walk in the ways of the Lord. You can't live their life for them. You can show them the way, but when it comes down to it, everyone has to make their own decision. Like it says in Hebrews 13:17, "Obey them that have the rule over you and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls, as they that must give account, that they may do so with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you." So it goes the same for us. We should really obey the pastors and follow the directions they give us, because they're trying to show us the right way. But as for this golden calf, it says in Psalm 106, "They made a calf in Horeb and worshipped the molten image. Thus they changed their glory into the similitude of an ox that eateth grass. They forgat God their Saviour, which had done great things in Egypt, wondrous works in the land of Ham, and terrible things by the Red Sea." So the golden calf here was the ultimate expression of the people's rebellion. But this wasn't the first, or this wasn't the last that we see of the golden calf, actually. The years came and went, and about 300 years later, after the Israelites had settled in Canaan, they eventually set up a monarchy with King Saul, then King David, and David's son, King Solomon. And Solomon had a son named Rehoboam, and Rehoboam taxed the people very heavily. He gave them far too much tax, and as a result, the northern tribes split off under another guy named Jeroboam. Jeroboam was from the tribe of Ephraim, which is around this sort of southern part of Israel. Um, Jeroboam led the northern tribes away and split away from the kingdom of Judah in the south. So we end up with Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And it says in 1 Kings 12:26, Jeroboam said in his heart, "Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up and do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam the king of Judah. And they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah." So the problem that Jeroboam faced was that even though he'd successfully split the kingdom, everyone still had to go down to Jerusalem, down here, to do the yearly worships and sacrifices and all that. And as the people went down there, they would probably look around and realize these people in Judah, they're the same as us. They speak the same language, they have the same culture, they worship the same God. Why are we split apart from them? Why are we a separate kingdom? We should really join back together. And who's keeping us apart? It's this Jeroboam guy. We should get rid of him. So 600 years after the Exodus, Jeroboam went and made his own golden calves. In 1 Kings 12:28, it says, "The king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt," echoing the same words that Aaron said 600 years before. "And he set the one in Bethel, and he put the other one in Dan." And on the map here, Bethel's this spot here, Jerusalem is that one there, and Dan is all the way up north at the top. So he kind of put one at each end of Israel to make it so that everyone had access to a golden calf, no matter where they were. And it meant they wouldn't have to go down to Jerusalem. So Jeroboam was using the religion of the people to manipulate them for his own political ends, to keep himself in power and to keep the people loyal. And this was all sold to the people under the idea that it's an easier way to serve the Lord. After all, it was still basically the same God, and the feasts and rituals were all more or less the same, and it was closer and easier to get to. And to be fair, if you lived way up north here in the tribe of Naphtali, that'd be pretty hard to argue against. You could either walk for like a month to get down to Jerusalem, carrying the calves and the goats and the turtle doves that you had to have for sacrifice, and your whole family with you. Or you could maybe take a day, pop down to the local golden calf, do your shopping, do your sacrifices and offerings, and it's all done, and you've saved yourself 2 months of walking. It'd be honestly pretty easy to justify that to yourself, that that's the right way to go. You'd feel good, and it's more convenient. And you know there's even priests that have been set up there. There's a temple. There's feasts, sacrifices. It all looks very much the same, even though it's completely against what the Lord has said. Now this one act had an enormous impact in turning the people of Israel away from the Lord in the years to come. If you look in the rest of the books of Kings and Chronicles, they all have the same thing to say about the kings who turned away from the Lord. It's, so-and-so got put on the throne, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he followed the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. So this thing that Jeroboam did, making the calves, just ruined Israel for the rest of the time that they existed. And the Israelites never recovered from Jeroboam's convenience. So why Bethel? That's this spot here, Bethel. Bethel had long been considered a holy place ever since the time of Jacob. In Genesis 28, it talks about the patriarch Jacob. It says, Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached unto heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid, and said, How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for a pillow and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil upon the face of it, poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. And Bethel means, Beth is house, and El means the Almighty One. El sort of means strength. So yeah, Almighty. So once the Israelites came into Canaan to settle it later, Bethel was basically the place where they put the tabernacle. They put it in a place called Shiloh, which was just a little bit north of Bethel. And in the time of the judges, when there were no kings and no temples around the place, Bethel was kind of where all the prophets gathered. Like Samuel went to Bethel to preach to the people and to judge them. So several hundred years later, by the time of Jeroboam, when the tabernacle had been moved from Bethel down into Jerusalem, and the priests and the ark and the altar and all that, Bethel was still traditionally and historically considered to be a holy place. So when Jeroboam went and put one of the golden calves there, Bethel had a lot of credibility as being a holy place. So it made sense for the people to go there to worship. The second calf, set up right in the far north in Dan, this is actually the temple. It still exists today. You can go and have a look at the temple in Dan where the golden calves were. The second one was set up in Dan, way up far north, out of convenience. Since it was the northernmost city of Israel and Bethel was one of the southernmost cities, so it just kind of split gave everyone somewhere close to go to. This is a bronze calf that was excavated from a historical site in Israel, which dates back to about this time. So this is probably one of the like someone's personal bronze calf that they worshipped from the same cult, I suppose, the same religion. So soon after these temples were set up in Bethel and Dan, it's the very next chapter, actually, a prophet comes along to condemn them. In 1 Kings 13, verse 1, it says, "Behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. And he cried against the altar in the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, Behold, a child shall be born unto the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests and of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. And he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign which the Lord hath spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out. And it came to pass when King Jeroboam heard this, the saying of the man of God, which had cried against the altar in Bethel, that he put forth his hand from the altar, saying, Lay hold on him. And his hand, which he put forth against him, dried up, so that he could not pull it in again to him. And the altar was rent, and the ashes were poured out, according to the sign which the man of God had given." So this prophecy is set up that a man named Josiah will come and destroy this altar one day. And there's about 300 years before that happens. And in the intervening years, some of the other prophets write about it as well. Hosea also prophesied about its destruction. In Hosea 10, verse 5, he says that the inhabitants of Samaria shall fear because of the calves of Beth Aven. In this case, when he says Beth Aven, it means Beth, again, house, and Aven is like emptiness or vanity. So he's using the word Beth Aven to, it says in the Amplified Bible, it's a contemptuous reference to Bethel, then noted for idolatry. So he's calling, instead of the house of the Almighty, it's the house of vanity. He goes on to say, For the people thereof shall mourn over it, and the priests thereof that rejoiced on it for the glory thereof, because it is departed from it. It shall be also carried unto Assyria for a present to King Jareb. It's probably referring to King Sargon II of Assyria, who came and took the city of Samaria. They came in from the north and took most of Israel captive. It says, The high places also of Beth Aven, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. The thorns and the thistle shall come up upon their altars, and they shall say to the mountains, Cover us, and to the hills, Fall on us. And later again, the prophet Jeremiah recalls how these golden calves at Bethel weren't much shop against the Assyrians. In Jeremiah 48:13, uh, when describing when Israel was led into captivity, he says the house of Israel was ashamed of Bethel, which was their confidence. Um, when the Assyrians led them captive, they were ashamed that their golden calves couldn't do anything to stop it. And that brings us to a funny point in history. So after Israel had been taken captive by the Assyrians, but before Judah was taken captive by the Babylonians, the world looked a bit like this. In green is the Assyrian Empire, and right in the middle of it is this little pocket of independence called Judah. The Assyrians took over most of the known world, but they couldn't conquer Judah, which was being led by King Hezekiah at the time. About 70 years after the Assyrians came through, there's another king of Judah named Josiah, the promised Josiah who would destroy the Temple of Bethel. But by this time, Judah only exists in this little pocket here, and Bethel is about there, outside of their territory, and Dan is, all the way up here somewhere. However, it's also at a time right at the very end of the Assyrian Empire, where the Babylonians over here are starting to build up in strength and starting to rebel and make their own kingdom, and the strength of Assyria is really starting to wane, and they sort of pulled back from the very edges of their empire, and so Judah was left in a place where they didn't have as much oversight or oppression by the Assyrians. So Josiah was kind of free to push out his borders a bit, and so when Josiah came into power, he instituted a whole lot of religious reforms in Israel and destroyed all the temples to the false gods and things like this. So since the Assyrians were kind of pulling back from that, Josiah could push out, and he went throughout the rest of the land of Israel and instituted these reforms as well to bring all the people back to the Lord. So 2 Kings 22, it says, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem and did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. So part of this was Josiah rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem, and in doing so, he uncovered the book of the law, which had been lost. And when they opened it and read it out, he realized that they'd all strayed a very long way from what the Lord wanted them to do. And as a result, Josiah rends his clothes and fasts and prays and gets rid of all the false gods and the false idols all around the place. 2 Kings 23, it says, the high places which were before Jerusalem, which Solomon had built for Ashtoreth and Chemosh and Milcom and all the rest of them anyway, he broke them in pieces and cut down their groves and filled their places with the bones of dead men. And then he pushes out to Bethel, and 2 Kings 23, the prophecy is fulfilled. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, both that and the altar and the high place he broke down and burned the high place and stamped it small to powder. And he burned the grove. And as Josiah turned himself, he spied the sepulchres that were there in the mount, or the tombs. And he sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them upon the altar and polluted it, according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. So fulfilling to the very letter a prophecy that had been made 300 years earlier. And he kept on doing that. In 2 Chronicles, it says how he made his way all the way up the north to Naphtali, which was the northernmost bound of Israel, and did the same thing, and burned all the bones of the priests on their altars and got rid of the prophets of Baal and all the rest of that. But by this time, unfortunately, it was too little and it was too late. Israel and Judah had already committed so many sins through all the years that the Lord required a reckoning and their destruction. It says in 2 Kings 22, so Josiah sought the Lord after he'd done all this stuff and said, is this enough? And the Lord said, behold, I will bring evil upon this place and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah hath read, because they have forsaken me and burned incense unto other gods. So unlike the first golden calf at Sinai when Moses turned back the wrath of God from destroying the people. At this time, the Lord did not relent. And in spite of the concerted religious reform throughout the land, even beyond its borders out to Israel, um, it was still going to come. The judgment still had to come. But there was one bit of mercy in 2 Kings 22:18. It says, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because thy heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord, when thou heardst that I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, and hast rent thy clothes and wept, I have also heard thee, says the Lord. Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place." So because of the things that Josiah had done, God at least gave him the mercy of letting him die before all the judgment and destruction came. And this is kind of the situation that we find ourselves in the world today. The world cries out for its own judgment. It's overflowing with sin and injustice and hedonism. And the day of wrath and the day of judgment is coming. But even so, it's our job to show the people of the world that they can come out of it and be saved. That the kingdom of God is a place of safety from the destruction of the world. And that we can, being saved, it'll be like it said to Josiah, "Thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place." Or, as it also says in Psalm 91, verse 7, "1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. And only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation." So I think that the lesson to be learned from this is it was rebellion that made the golden calves get built in the first place. It was rebellion that kept the people away. And in the second instance, when Jeroboam made the golden calves, the people were not following the Lord out of a matter of convenience. So we need to keep in mind that even though it's not always convenient to follow the Lord, that turning aside out of convenience can make a huge impact to our walk in the Lord, and can be the thing that really takes us down. So yeah, I'd just like to leave it there.